Hi, Simon. How are you? You okay?
Yeah, good. Thank you. You?
Yeah, very well. Good to see you, Simon. Good to see you. Good to see you, Tim. I don't think we can hear you just yet, but hello. How are you doing? Right. We've got another. Asher is joining us here. Hi, Asher. Okay. Um, and Andy's joining us. Right. So I'm just going to wait a few more minutes. For those of you that have not been on one of our roundtables, I think pretty much everyone I recognise everyone's name here who have been on one of our calls before. For those of you that have not been on any of the roundtable events before, very relaxed and informal. Some house rules, just try and, for now, keep yourself on mute. We do sometimes have a bit of an issue where people don't realise they're not on mute, and then we just get a bit of background noise. I think, Simon, that was your fault last week, wasn't it? Yeah. But listen, we've all got families, and some of us have got dogs in the house. I certainly have. If there's an Amazon delivery, my dog will go mental, so I'll try and keep myself on mute while Andrew and Simon are doing their presentation. But if everyone else can just mute themselves when they get on the call. I think we've got about 19 people on the call today so far, so that's really good. So welcome to everybody. We will kick off in any minute now. We're just getting a few more people joining the call, so that's brilliant. I'm just going to get a picture here of everybody. We are recording the call today, and the slides will be available to view. We'll put them on our LinkedIn group first, and then we'll share them with you directly if we can later in the week or early next week. We've now got all of our videos uploaded onto YouTube, completely unedited, so they're rough around the edges, but they give the whole presentation that everyone's given us so far. I think this is our 9th round table that we've done, so I think it's been fantastic. The quality of the presenters have been brilliant. The attendees have been fantastic. And what's really important, actually, is the quality of the questions that have been put to the panel on every single round table. And that's been really, really good. So for those of you that are attending just to view, over the course of the presentation, have a think about your questions. We're probably going to spend 20-25 minutes on the presentation, and then we'll open up to the floor and you'll be able to ask any questions you like. So first of all, let me do some introductions. My name's s.mikkelsen. I head up the private client division of ERG. We're a people business, recruitment business, and consultancy business. We help companies solve their business strategy challenges through delivering tech projects and people. On the call today, we've got Andrew Gadd, who's the MD for Primed. Andrew has, 15 plus years experience leading programs and projects, leading business change and digital transformation projects. He's worked for Phones for You, Orange, I think, for a little bit, Dixon's Car Phone Warehouse, and he's also spent some time in his primed role working for companies like Boots and delivering quite a lot of change to them. Alongside Andrew, presenting and supporting, is Simon Ellis. Simon has slightly more experience, I guess, than most of us, 20 plus years, started life out at British Aerospace Engineering and then moved into Oracle, spent 5-6 years with Oracle. And he's basically a business strategy generalist, tech leader, cloud strategy. I mean, Simon, you're sort of, I always struggle to introduce you because you've got such a broad range of skills. Everyone speaks so highly of you. But sum up very, very quickly what you're all about, Simon.
Oh my God, there's a challenge after that. I just help people solve problems, Sam. How's about that? You know, it's all about finding solutions to people's problems and working with people. Let's summarize it that way. As a wee Scotsman.
Well, that'll do. Thank you, Simon. Andrew, I hope I did you credit there with your introduction.
Thanks. Yeah, that'll do.
Good stuff. All right. So, listen, we've got a lot to get through this morning. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll crack on with the presentation. If at any point anybody's got any questions or any queries, please just, raise your hand. And also, right at the end, we'll open it up to everybody to ask any questions they feel. But we'll crack on. Andrew, when we go through to the next slide, just give me a shout and I'll go to the next slide for you, and I'll mute myself now.
Okay. Thanks very much for the introduction, Sam. Hello, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity just to give a brief presentation on what we're doing at Primed and a little bit about our background and what our future looks like. But just to give you a little bit of our background, Primed was actually born out of one of those engagements. I'm not going to tell you which one that I was working on, where we were delivering a transformation program at the same time as the organization was merging with another organization. And you can imagine all of the interesting data points, all the different politics that had to come together with regards to understanding what the lay of the land looks like and what the future looked like with regards to transformation, and how you can manage that change through such a, it was like a melting pot of politics and a melting pot of factless politics as well. So the challenge we faced in that organization was actually trying to work out where the value of the transformation was in a merger. And it was trying to get a context, and it's all about, and this is where Primed really has ended up, is trying to figure out a context all the time through some of the information that we're trying to gather and trying to represent up to the scene. So the lady who was in charge of that organization at the time asked me to change a little bit the dynamic of the program. And it cost about £250,000 of fact finding to tell her how much it was going to cost to change the actual direction of the program. So that was the point where I thought there has to be a better way of bringing some of this information together, because we were trying to collect things like process groups, trying to collect things like, value points, risks, regulations, technology stacks, et cetera, and it was just like, wow, this is so much information. How can we represent this in a way that means that people can ask questions and look at it through different lenses and find the answers through different lenses? And that's a generation of Primed. And literally, I went back with an architect back to my house that night, 3 bottles of wine, loads of Post-its over my wall, and we thought, you know what, I think we got something here. So it was an interesting genesis. We were drunk at the end of it, but unfortunately, I think we ended up with something that was actually quite compelling as a result of it. So we've gone on a long journey in Primed, because it's all about learning. I don't recommend ever building a software company, by the way, if you want to keep your hair and stay stress-free. But it's been an interesting journey, because we obviously have to find, we're always trying to follow where we think the money is, where the compelling event is. And it was very interesting for us. We were very lucky in some respects, but luck comes with a lot of hard work, to find an opportunity in an investment bank that was looking for an opportunity to look at risk through a different type of lens. And it was a capital risk market, which enabled us then to go and look at other opportunities. And then GDPR came along. And then GDPR was amazing for us, because GDPR was about bringing technology assets, process groups, regulations, data, rules, organizational structure together to figure out where can those things get applied, and how can we get a view through that information to make sure we're doing the right thing in the right order, at the same time as the organization is trying to change or work out where the appropriate remediation is. And that was really a sweet spot for Primed. And so Primed then became a bit of a reg tech platform, and it was quite, reg tech was a popular term and remains a popular term. But now, why do we think it's relevant now? Well, reg tech's always important, but actually all that stuff I talked about previously is also important in the current guise of what's going on in the world. Because, if you just move on to the next slide for me a second, Sam. Organizations are battling now, or seeing in adversity in terms of trying to figure out where they need to be, what's going on in the environment. Obviously, there's a lot of external factors that are going to affect the way that they operate. And so they're going to look for growth, but they're fundamentally looking for survival. And so, this is a really important time for them to be able to bring a lot of information together to work out where the opportunities, the threats are, and focus on the right things at the right time. And in that moment, it's really important not just to, because there's a lot of information that sits in the business, knowledge sits in the business. There's a lot of people maybe possibly losing their jobs over the next, period of time, where a lot of that information is just going to go. And so it's a really important time for organizations to get that knowledge bank together. and to try and be slightly more agile with regards to how they can use that information and build corners of the jigsaw, build a bit of a picture, and then gradually get to an opportunity where they can actually focus on where the problems, where the fires are, and be able to focus on what they need to be able to do to resolve those things. Now, that comes with a shed load of challenges because, information is very difficult to get on. It's normally quite fragmented. It's normally quite distributed. It's normally in completely different formats and etc. And it normally has multiple different sources of truth. So massive data management is a massive problem in the business. Normally organizations don't have good inventories. CMDBs are almost like, are just a premium. If they're done well, it's a rarity, etc. So trying to get the right information from all of these information points to be able to present it in a context is a critical requirement for any organization to be able to say that they're doing the right thing and they have all the facts available to make those decisions. And I think, where CEOs are at the moment, certainly a lot of our engagement, because we're talking to people about target operating models. We're talking to organizations about, how they should line themselves up with regards to this new, front they're facing. They're just wondering about what is front office, middle office, and back office, and how do these things join together? What is my customer journey? I mean, we're talking to an organisation at the moment, do consultancy in the building society space, and they're going, the whole journey of somebody buying a house is so fragmented because there's so many different parties involved. How can I get a better picture of knowing where all those join points are from a data perspective, a customer perspective, a compliance perspective, to know that if I adjust something, I'm doing the right thing? And so this is really where, Primed is a bit of a sweet spot for us, because we are effectively trying to bring all that stuff together. So if I could just move on to the next slide, Sam. Now, there's a shed load of research on this. I don't need to tell you I'm sure you guys know, all of the big players have always talked about, insight is power and all that sort of stuff, but there's the KPMGs and Forresters and all the big players are talking about 8 primary patterns that need to be addressed, the CEOs are trying to address, and these are strap lines, but there is some substance behind it. And so for example, we talk about insight-driven strategies and actions, that's effectively what we're talking about here, is basically understanding the external risks, understanding the internal risks and issues in an organization and the opportunities that comes with. But to be able to do that, you don't have to implement a GRC system to do that, because that's kind of top down, and generally it takes, it never gets delivered because you can never get into the corners of the organization. So fundamentally, you need a mechanism to be able to get a good reach into the business to ask the right questions, which kind of leads on to what the third point on that list around aligned and empowered workforce. The only way you can get an aligned and empowered workforce is if you give them a voice, okay, and you get the facts from them, you understand where the issues are, you give them the operational capabilities they need to do their jobs. And in this environment, especially where so many people are going to have to be asked possibly to work from home, or where those environmental factors need to be brought in terms of mental health, or compliance patterns, or technology opportunities, etc. Those things need to be brought in to understand exactly where the challenges are, to enable somebody to say, I've actually got the right level of insight to actually drive a strategy in terms of my workforce. So as you can see, it's these 6 things here are all knitted, they're all entwined. So where you talk about seamless interactions in commerce, the only real way of knowing that you've got a good seamless interaction in commerce is if you actually know how all your value chains join together, how your processes join together, how your user journeys and your stories join together, and where they relate to the processes and that value chain and the tech stack and regulatory obligations. Now, otherwise you are almost, as I just example I cited earlier with regards to the companies where they are the mortgage companies, they just got such broken siloed journeys, they don't know how those things join up, so they've got to kind of bring that information together to be able to justify some of the things that they actually want to do in their organization. So all of these points that are highlighted by KPMG and Forrester are all very relevant to the things that we're trying to resolve in Primed, where, as I mentioned, sort of aligning the workforce to give them a voice by actually asking them questions, even empowering customers by giving them a set of surveys to be able to bring the facts in, to know where the customer journey is broken, to be able to work on those opportunities and know how they interact with that particular value chain. Other things around them pointing out there around integrated partner alliance ecosystems, that again is about trying to understand exactly how your operation is affected by your ecosystem the partners and suppliers, but also knowing then therefore where the opportunities are, but also knowing that if you do engage in in investing in a particular partner to resolve or to possibly centralize processes or distribute processes or outsource processes, etc., you've got to know you've got some trust behind it. The only way you can get some trust behind it is having all the facts to know that you can apply the right SLAs, the right KPIs, the right terms in the contract. And then with those sort of things, when they're connected to your process, if you've got those facts and they're joined up, then you can apply the right level of operational governance over the top of it. But again, I've seen in so many organizations where they've stepped into sort of relationships with an alliance partner where they go in slightly blind because they don't necessarily know what they're outsourcing, and you never outsource a problem, but most of the time they don't even know that the problem exists and they outsource a problem, and then they've got the challenge of trying to keep those things contractually aligned. So again, all that is about getting the information together, aligning it, trusting it, and then rolling it into those different types of opportunities. One option there about responsive operational and supply chain. Well, you can't really be responsive with agility unless you actually have the facts at your fingertips. And what I find in some of these organizations that I've delivered lots of projects into, we're always going to rediscover. Right, tell us what those processes are. I'm just discovering again and again and again. Well, didn't you just do that on a project last time? Why are you doing it again? Why can't you ask the question once, store the information, and then just say, I'm just going to ask a few other questions just to make sure I can get some kind of like a meaty response that will enable me to drive some change into it. So to enable some responsive operation and supply chain, you've got to have the facts at your fingertips. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to adjust quickly, to be able to respond quickly. So it's kind of again, all of those things talk about bringing the collective information together. So if I could just ask you to move on, Sam, just in terms of where we feel that C-suite currently are looking at where the opportunities are now. I don't think it really matters what your role is in any organization. These are kind of the areas where people are looking at, and I've mentioned one. What should my target operating model look like now? Well, if you know what your strategy is and where your key components are, your KPIs that you're trying to measure or adjust, you've got to know where you're starting from. So again, it's about being able to bring that information together quickly, understand its relevance to other elements within the organization in terms of how to process, how are they enabled by tech, how are they enabled by people. One fact, I was talking on a call this morning with my team about one of the things we're doing is the fact that there are SMEs in business, and every time I go and do a project, the first part of the discovery is knowing who the people are, who are the SMEs, and it's why do I need to rediscover that every time? Why can't there be an inventory of somebody saying these are the people who know this process, this tech, this regulation, this policy, to enable me to go and say, I know how I'm going to go and distribute my questions, because there's something there that's already maintained. Maintenance is always a challenge, but if you could start off with something, you don't have to discover and rediscover all the time. So this is just another avenue of just bringing inventory together to be able to people to respond and act with some agility in that change arena. Now, I mean, Simon may well talk about some of these things, possibly in terms of some of the areas that people are focusing on, just based on some of his engagements. But on our engagements, there's a lot of focus now on people realigning policies, bringing policies into a centralized particular area. A lot of people are obviously focusing on not just growth, but on survival. We're talking to a few organizations that are saying, how can we survive? How can we manage our capital at the moment? They're actually finding opportunities as well, both in terms of having an operating model that can support other businesses who are struggling because they have a good work from home capability. So they're now actually building new opportunities that come with that as well. So, but that again just comes out of a demonstrable ability to say they've got control, they've got governance. Imagine this, we've just done a massive GDPR program and we've got access and management of all of our data. Now everybody works from home. What do? Do they print stuff out on their printers? Do they take people's telephone numbers? How is all that stuff managed now? So if you can demonstrate that through agility, through good sort of a suite of methods of governance, then it actually provides itself an opportunity to find other opportunities in different markets as well. I don't know, Simon, is there anything on that in terms of where we feel the kind of the C-suite are focusing their attention on in terms of things at the moment you want to add?
Yes. So I guess kind of complementing everything you said, I'd kind of back up, Andrew. I think for me though, very much at the moment, the C-suite CEOs are very interested in how they manage cost, where cost is within the enterprise. You know, how can they consolidate? How can they save cost? How can they automate, reduce cost? How can they be more agile? You know, I think we've all seen the situation where some organizations have struggled to go digital. You know, so how can they get more agility? How can they deliver services in different ways to their customers? And if you don't actually have a view of your enterprise, enough of a detail and in a connected way, you can't join up your front, middle, and back office. You can't optimize your processes. You can't find opportunities for potentially shared or consolidated services. So I think regulation and stuff you've talked about, Andrew, is important, but you know, just looking at literally surviving at the moment, to survive to thrive is always a good one. I like, is C-suite are really looking at how can I understand my organization, find opportunities for cost saving, find opportunities for automation, find opportunities so I can actually introduce new disruptive technologies or business models that help me survive. And I guess if I was a CEO, that's what I'm waking up and worrying about, is that side. Other members of the C-suite will definitely be worrying about the data and things like that, Andrew, like you talked about. But certainly for me, the conversations I'm having with people is I need to manage my costs. I need to understand how I can streamline. I understand how I need to automate and save costs and bring new models in so I can survive through this COVID. Because most of them are saying, the ones I'm talking about, is yes, we've had a COVID hit. So mid and long term, they're also worried about, not just the short term.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, thanks, Simon. So, Sam, could you sort of flip on to the next slide? There's been a couple of roundtables on information framework, you know, in the last couple of weeks, and the premise of it is really based on an element of truth, you know, and having it in a place that enables organizations to be able to use it quickly and respond to, you know, either things coming into it to be able to respond to them outwards, or to be able to collect things, to be able to make sure they can deal with things internally. Now, the bringing of the information together is always a challenge, okay, because what tends to happen is that everyone goes, well, I've got inventory that covers my, you know, all of my assets. I have inventory that covers all of my risk. I have inventory that covers all my processes. But what tends to happen in these things is that actually you don't need all of that inventory to actually get value out of joining two pieces of information together. And so there's always a little bit of worry. Well, you know, well, do I need to bring all this together? How can I create this sounds like a really complicated, you know, data model you're trying to create. Well, it's not that complicated. It's just, if there's a question that needs to be answered, then there's certain components of that information you just need to know. And that's really where, you know, a lot of the power of the primed is not actually trying to bring, you know, massive data together to try and crunch through it. It's actually just understanding the questions that need to be answered. What are the key components and categories of those answers to enable you to go dive deeper and broader? And then how can you maybe cast the net further afield? And how can you hold that information to be able to make it reusable again? And so it is when we talk about, you know, prime being a single source of truth, we're not talking about prime being the master data for the entire organization. Primed is a portal that enables organizations to connect information where it's relevant. And so if we just take one example where we've you know, utilized what's been done previously to enable an organization to actually answer some questions a bit quicker. So we went to an organization and they said, well, you know, we need an information framework around this particular thing because we've got some challenges with regards to a compliance issue, and we've got some challenges with regards to an operating model issue here. And the question wasn't, you know, well, give us all your information. We asked, what information do you currently have? And they said, well, we don't really have any information. So the question was then asked, did you do a GDPR program? Yes, we did. Okay, so therefore you probably have a list of assets then, don't you? Yes, we do. You probably have a list of processes, don't you? Yes, we do. You probably have some information around some security profiles and some operational profiles and some obligations with regards to how you manage that data. Yes, we do. So therefore, that was actually nearly 70% of everything you needed to answer the question they were trying to ask. So it's amazing how much information already presides or resides in an organization that can just be pulled in and connected and offer another level of insight that they didn't even glean or didn't even figure that they needed again. So again, we are about not discovery, rediscovery, and this is what we're trying to drive as a value and a principle and almost really trying to be crusaders in this opportunity, is to say, you've got all this information. Don't ask it again and again and again. Just connect it once and then revalidate it once you want to use it again, which is fine, which might take a little bit of time. But the cost of trying to collect information on every single project is normally between 35 and 40% of a project cost is information gathering. Okay, if you can reduce that even by half, then you're taking a shed load of cost out of your change. And if you can use that by empowering other things, you're also giving value to that data, not just taking costs out of that data. So that's a really important part of our proposition, and a really important part of the things that we're trying to crusade and drive into organizations. Is it might seem like an absolute pain in the ass to actually say, I've got information, I need to connect it, I need to maintain it. But the value and the cost reduction in you doing it again next time it just speaks for itself. And that's why things like, we talk about 4 times velocity, which is actually, this actual value comes from a different organization, different consultancy. You do get quicker and quicker and quicker at being able to answer questions as soon as you start creating pictures and joining the corners of a jigsaw, because you just had to add another layer and you've already got a better picture and a better picture. Then it just becomes about kind of maintenance and a discipline that you drive over the top of that to make sure you can keep it rich, keep it alive, and keep it evergreen. If I could just ask you to move on to me a second again, Sam. So these are kind of like the natural challenges and objections that you get when you start talking about data, in terms of where an organization is and where it needs to be. So on the left-hand side there are really kind of all of the problems. Data generally is fragmented, it is inaccurate, it's massively politicized. And because information is power, and so a lot of people do like to hold on to the information because they feel that if they let it go, then they're disempowering themselves. But actually, if they had a little bit of sense about them, they could actually create their own, value in the sense of being able to ask for more information to connect to it and offer themselves even more value in their own operation. And so there are the things that, on the left-hand side that cause organizations problems with regards to building an information framework. And ultimately, utopia would be everything on the right-hand side being in place. It is never that simple, obviously, but as soon as you start joining one piece of information with another information, you've got exponential value in it. So a very, very small example, and I'll cite the GDPR one again. As soon as you know what assets and technology you need to support and enable a process, you've got value. As soon as you know a process and another process connect, you've got a value chain. And then you've also got exponential value, because you know how, if you're going to adjust a set of customer journeys that sit across that value chain, you already know the technology that's involved in it. So it's just being able to increment that value and being able to show that actually by becoming more data-driven requirements, as opposed to requirements asking for the data, becomes a completely different paradigm shift in how people should operate change, and will, as soon as people start becoming a little bit more savvy to this, and obviously it will as soon as they start buying primed as well. Some of the other kind of value elements, I did mention one earlier around kind of the cost of change. So fact finding, these are this isn't just made up numbers. There's so much money goes into finding the information, and not just once. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a project and probably asked the same question of the same individual, probably for the 5th time that year. Can you tell me a little bit something about your application, to the controls you have? Can you tell me something about your process? Oh, I did a project about that 2 weeks ago. Why did you go and ask them? Oh, sorry, that data's gone now, or that consultancy's gone now, or that vehicle that has traveled now. So let's start again, because it might have changed. It might have changed, but really would it have changed that much? The other element in terms of savings, 70% of projects fail because they have poor requirements, and they have poor requirements because people generally don't have the right grip of the scope, but they don't have a good grip of the scope because they don't have the good connections into the organization to know where all of those things interrelate. So if you can start building a picture, you've got a very good chance of that 70% of projects failing coming down, because you've got a very good chance of actually maintaining a good view on the requirement in terms of how all those things interconnect within an operating model. And then obviously there's exponential value in terms of the reusability of that information on other things. And so as soon as you start saying you have some of this information together, for example, an example would be you can just apply different audit capabilities across it. All of a sudden you've got, oh, I know all the people in that organization now that I can actually say I'm going to run an audit process across the top of it. Or if you're a consultancy, it might actually be a bit of a Trojan horse for you to say, I've gathered the facts, I know where your problems are, I can actually see that actually strategically you've got some things over here you should focus on because I've now got the information that enables me to answer those questions. So it becomes an opportunity as much as it becomes a problem solver for companies. We're working with consultancies to say, let's enable your and digitize your proposition by going in and taking the information you normally gather, digitizing it, representing it digitally in dashboards and viewable components. And then it gives you another opportunity to say, oh, now I've got this, I could probably come and do some more work for you and ask some more questions and offer you some more value. So there is that as well. Now, you know, McKinsey is not frightened of doing publications, and you know, it says that, you know, by bringing a connected perspective together, it does offer massive opportunities of efficiencies. And one example of that is in the compliance space, because I can tell you now that the PCI, ISO 27000, you know, all these different types of standards, they all ask probably 90% of the same bloody question to the same people, and then all you're doing is just duplicating a control point, and they're saying, well, if I know that control supports that, then I know it supports all of these other standards as well. So why not ask once and answer many, which is really where McKinsey was coming from in that particular piece there. And that's just one use case that can offer that value. So if I just ask you just to move on, just how much time have we got, Sam, before yeah, take me off, mate. Sorry.
5 or 10 minutes, I think, Andrew. And just obviously conscious, we're coming up to 25 to now.
Okay, mate. Great. So yeah, if I just move slides on, if you would, Sam. So just to give you a bit of insight, what we did in Prime. So this is really, you know, it's taken from some of our material. What we do is we enable a number of different mechanics to be able to go and answer those questions. You can either source the information directly from its source. You can ask the question in the form of a survey or create structured surveys. You can create profile templates to say, I want to know more about this thing. Here's a profile I want you to fill it in, and Prime consumes it. And then what it enables you then to do is to apply workflow across the top of that, which is really where a lot of the value comes, because imagine having, say for example, let's take one organization I recently worked in that actually had 368 different applications that needed to ask a question of to figure out whether it was compliant or not. Imagine trying to manage that 368 lists with probably 28 different individuals who understood those environments. And then imagine then trying to manage the information back and then where they were in the life cycle of gathering that information and knowing where people needed reminding or the problem needed escalating. So what we did is just take that requires a shed load of project management. It actually needed to start off with, this is just going to be a nightmare managing through spreadsheets. So this is really where Prime came into its own, because you just apply workflow over that information gathering and you go, I know where it needs to go. I know where it is in that life cycle of collecting it. And then what you do then is say, I gather something, I categorize it, I now need to find out more about it because I found something that maybe something contained some information that I need to go and gather some more information. But because you've got the ecosystem there, you just run another workflow across top of it. So that's fundamentally the principle of how we get data into Primed, and it is a very, very powerful solution in terms of you know, making sure that an individual can stay on top of where it is in that life cycle. Sam, if I could just actually move on, I'm just going to rattle through some of these things now. And so what that does, that just enables those inventories to be lined up. And what we then realize is, well, it's going to be, that's fine having maybe 20 lists of things. How can we make sure we create a relational aspect to that? So, so what we did is we created something in Prime which actually makes it really, really simple to create the relationships between one and many things. So if you have your list of processes on one side and your list of assets on the other side, you can effectively strike them against each other. And then all of a sudden you've got, I understand now context. I've now got the context of how the app works. And it might be that you have a list of processes and a list of journeys, and you go, right, okay, these are all the journeys that preside within that process, or these are all the regulations that relate to that policy, and you just speedily strike things together. And all of a sudden then you have an operating model, because an operating model isn't flat. It is deep and wide and has many, many dimensions to it. And that is really where, you know, the kind of the power of the product comes through, because again, once you have that, you can run workflow over the top of that and say, I now want to know some questions because those things connect, which is really a really important part of the process. So if I could just ask you to add, to move that through again for me a second. Thank you. And so, so once you kind of got a connected enterprise, which is really the slide before, was kind of joining all the information across that enterprise. It's about then managing and maintaining that through through policy. So this is just what we term in the product as policy, is effectively a set of rules. It might be that if any of those things change, and because I know it connects to many of those things, I've got to ask somebody a question to say whether they're happy for it to change or not. Or if those things are saying they cost this much, I also need to go and check the validity of that, because there's other components that are connected to it that give me some more assurance over the answers. And so when we talk about connected enterprise, and when Simon earlier was talking about understanding where the costs are in a business or where the opportunities are, I want to keep the costs down, I want to make sure I'm spending the capital on the right things. Unless you've got all of these things connected, you are in the dark, and you are you effectively you will find gremlins, you will find those ghosts, and that's really the whole point of this, is to empower the organization to be able to make the right decisions, to empower them to make the right decisions on what their change portfolio needs to look like. They need to know it's connected, how it's connected to the organization. To empower the organization to decide whether it wants to take a process out, they need to know it's connected, what suppliers are engaged in, what tech's engaged with it. And they need to know whether there's some things in that technology that might be connected to a particular contract, which means they can't remove it because there's a term in there which is going to cost them £500,000 to remove it. So unless you have a quick way of getting all of those facts aligned, and a way that you feel is robust to actually drive your questions through those facts, you are shooting in the dark, and you are relying on a lot of individuals to come together, a lot of analysts to come together, and a lot of interpretation of flat data, which costs money, takes time, and is generally open to lots of challenges with regards to errors being prone, and without the opportunity to run sort of like a management workflow over the top of it. So in essence, I'm going to slow down now because I'm conscious I talk 400 miles an hour, and I'm going to breathe for a second and maybe take a glass of water. That is what we're all about. We are about connecting the enterprise, and we feel now we've got a really interesting term. We're in kind of interesting as regards to our survival and our development now, but we also feel this is a massive opportunity for us, because really now it's really important for organizations to see the corners of their enterprise, empower their users to give them the facts back, and also to be able to ensure that the information that they have gives them a bit of a leap, or a level playing field at least, to be able to drive some strategic change, and some change which is 100% going to be necessary, because we are now in this world of change and survival. And on that note, I will actually, Simon, do you want to say any more? Or should I?
No, I think we better give the community a chance to ask some questions. There, Andrew.
Thanks for that, Andrew. I think that was excellent, really, really good. And yeah, there was a lot of detail there. And I think, to be fair, I've been a bit unkind to you to expect you to deliver so much in such a short space of time. But that was brilliant, really, really good, really, really interesting. Is that right? That stat, 70% of projects fail, or is this in the 90% of all stats are made up? Is that true? Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of facts. There is generally, and they fail for a number of reasons. And the terms of failure is that they either cost too much, or they didn't deliver everything they were supposed to deliver, or they may have been a day late. So the boundaries of failure are you have to kind of justify. But that's there's always movement in those numbers, I would imagine. But the kind of the fact that it is up there is generally down to the fact that you didn't ask the right questions up front to know whether you were doing the right thing, or you had the right information to do the thing you want to do.
So when you have a client and you go into a business, I guess there's a lot of pressure to deliver value really, really early. So for you, is it possible to go in and because it sounds like this gathering of information takes a hell of a long time. Yeah,
I mean that's why you don't when you do a jigsaw, you don't just chuck all the pieces in the middle and assume it's all going to be connected. This is why as soon as you get one corner, and it just empowers you to do other things quickly. So, and this is why I mentioned earlier around when we go in and do projects, we ask them, what have you got? What have you done recently? What are the projects you've done recently? What type of information have you collected recently? Because it inevitably, it will be there, and all that's required is for you to understand how you want to construct that information to be able to make sure that it's it can be almost be kind of a mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive model that enables you to do something else with it. So, but you're right. They all speed to value, so quick to say, I want value, but they also want, there's an element of trust in it as well. Organizations tend to, if you say the right things and you deliver your message with a certain amount of certainty, and then they'll trust you that you're going to do the right thing. And and trust, as I said, comes in the form of accurate information. And so we pivot on that.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. I've got our regular raising of the hand, David Rice. David, how are you doing? You okay, mate? Nice to see you again. Is that just before we start, though, David? Is that a lockdown haircut I can see?
It is indeed a lockdown haircut. Yeah, I went into the barbers and I asked for a s.mikkelsen, and this is what happened. Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. That's really interesting and some really great content. Sam knows I'm going to ask a data question because that's my bag. That's what I do. But I noticed you talked a lot, Andrew, about master data, and obviously the connected enterprise kind of depends on master data. So having consistent view of who your customers are, consistent chart of accounts, and so on and so forth. What I've often found in organizations is that if you have the conversation with execs in terms of you need to resolve your master data to be able to achieve AI, to be able to achieve automation, to be able to join the dots, they kind of shrug and say, master data, so what? I don't know what you're talking about, or so what? It doesn't really matter, and I'm not prepared to invest in it. And I've learned over the years, you've got to kind of change that conversation to you're not able to do X because of, and it often comes back to master data. Have you seen a similar thing, and how do you have the conversation around master data and articulate the value of it? Because a lot of organizations still don't understand how pivotal it is.
Yeah, and I don't think it's ever not going to be a challenge, to be honest with you, because of the organic nature of every organization. There's always people who are in and out based, they kind of leave, and so the people who know the data, people who preside over that, you're always getting organizations buying or selling. You're always getting processes being outsourced, insourced, etc. It's just going to be a perennial challenge of master data. The way we challenge, like yourself, the way you get around it is, so what's the question you need to answer? What are you striving towards? And if they're striving towards saying, I want to realign my portfolio, you go, well, okay, well, what do you know about your portfolio at the moment? Well, I know it's delivering all of these projects. Well, do you know what value it's bringing to you? Well, yes, because we have that in the PID, or we have that in a spreadsheet. Well, do you know which processes they're joined up pointing towards, which particular KPIs they align to? Well, no, we don't do that. We'll say, well, there you go. That's a piece of master data, that you need to be able to answer that question you've just asked. Okay, so master data is an interesting term because there is an educational thing that has to come with it. But if you try and educate on your way in, you're doomed, because you're spending most of your time educating as opposed to doing. So you've almost got to do these things in parallel by being as layman as you possibly can in your terminology and your requirement, but actually almost pseudo-educating in the process. And finding those people who are the advocates of what you're trying to do, and attaching yourself to those, so you don't just do it alone. You get the support of some other individuals who are actually driving towards or crusading towards having more of a data-driven organization as well. So it is a challenge, and master data is, I think it's a Jedi trick, really. Just look at my eyes, not around my eyes, and we'll get you to arrive at the right place. But you've got to start somewhere, and what we find is as soon as you offer some clean information and you go, do you know this is the makeup of your organization? As soon as you offer that, and then you offer something that connects to it, and you go, now you know this, imagine what would be great, how would it be like if you actually had clean data that connected to this as well. And they go, yeah, go and do that and find out that information. And it's kind of like that iterative sort of process, really, to get them to utopia, I guess.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you, Sam, you may have seen my latest LinkedIn post. There's a guy called Scott Taylor that talks a lot about master data. And one of the things he said is you don't go out and buy a load of rotten food, rotten vegetables, and then go and hire a fancy food scientist to create your recipes. So, and I quite like that, because what I often see is we can't be bothered with master data because we're doing AI or we're doing machine learning or we're doing automation. We're going to focus on that. But actually those things are underpinned by good quality, customer data, by good quality data about your products and so on and so forth. If you don't have that, you've got bad ingredients and you're trying to, the intelligence out the other end is going to be flawed. So I thought that was a...
Yeah, I get that completely, Dave. Really good point. And thank you, Andrew, for answering that. We've got a few people raising their hands. So I've got Susan, I've got Andy, and I think I've got Nick as well, who all want to ask a question. Susan, do you want to ask your question first?
Yeah, Andrew, that was really interesting. Thank you. And I really resonate with the project costs about the repeated answers. But so I've worked with a retail company and they've tried to do something similar to what you tried to do. But the actual maintenance of it was actually untenable because it was just costing them so much money, because their systems were all bolt-ons upon bolt-ons. There was lots of really complicated processes everywhere, and they couldn't sustain it, and then they left it. So do you have any advice of your companies about how to maintain it?
Somebody asked me that question, how do we keep this up to date? And the answer was, well, what's your change process? Because I asked them back a question, how do they currently change anyway? Surely that if you're changing something, you don't just change it, but you also change the information that's held about it somewhere. So, if, for example, you're just doing some technology change, you may update your asset tool or you may update your service tool. That's just part of the go live process, is to make sure that you kind of get a view on the scope for it going in the requirement, but also through the delivery life cycle. Your job is to make sure you update the information points to the new version or the new attributes or the new elements that have been adjusted. So the advice is keep it simple to start off with. Make sure you're getting value out of the information you've got. Okay, don't try and boil the ocean because because you can, unless obviously you put too much CO2, then we are boiling our oceans. But but also make sure it becomes parts of the organization philosophy or the organization's change practice, to ensure that as part of their delivery life cycle, those information points are updated. It's not just about delivering the value into the organization or the changing process or a new customer journey or new product or anything like that. It's also about the actual information in itself as a commodity. You must keep your information up to date, so it has to be part of that.
Okay, so but with companies with kind of like lots of legacy systems, which they've kind of like overlayered with new stuff, so it looks like fancy on the outside, but actually it's hell on the inside. Mm-hmm. Does your Primed actually favour newer companies than it does old legacy companies?
No, it's agnostic of any company. What it favours is an organisation that wants to try and get value out of connecting its information. Now, it favours an organisation that knows that if it just relies on things being in people's head, then it has no agility. Yeah. It favours. Even if you have got an old technology, what I'm not saying is that we're going to, Prime is going to go and connect and suck all that information out of that technology. It'll probably say, well, who's that person in that corner next to that desk who knows about that AS400 system, who can answer some questions. That means that we don't have to keep going asking those questions every single time, but we can build up a knowledge base around them. And that's really that's what it favors. So, an organization with a little bit of ambition to be able to go and drive, a little bit of an information framework into itself to get its values.
Thank you. Thanks.
Right, we've got Nick and Andy have a question. I'm just going to go directly down below Susan where I'm looking. So Andy, you're next, and then Nick, you're after Andy. So Andy, have you got a question for Andrew?
Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. This really resonates with me. I've used a similar-ish tool by a different little software company to do the same things. what we found is when you do it against, particularly against value streams, that recognizing the feedback of every change you make, and where I've done it before is on operational data, which really goes back to Simon's comment about how do you reduce, costs. Do you also provide that feedback loop? So, i.e., if you reduce, these 5 things, whether it's tickets, whether it's process steps, that it reflects to, a 5 or 6 person FTE saving, which, or whatever. Do you also engage in that feedback loop to drive those change projects? Because that's what it's really all about, is creating an agile change project for whatever those processes are. And it's the feedback to show the value. And just the other comment I make is, in my experience, you're absolutely right. People get bogged down with master data, trying to grab all the data before they try to make one single decision. In my experience, most of this stuff actually for most organizations initially is pretty low-hanging fruit they just don't know about. Yes. And so it's really the statement about how do you get that feedback?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I'll cite an example. One of the things that we're doing with one particular organization is where their job is to go and assess the validity or the compliance of something, and then what they need to do is then highlight what changes to controls are required, or what changes to a process are required, and then the net effect of that, either to the compliance or the net effect of that to the cost component. Okay, now that's fine just as a kind of an operational stack. I now know all this information, but what we've done in Prime is we can then translate that into, now you know the scope of the project, because it then becomes, this is what you're trying to achieve, and then you build up a cost component of the project. So really all these things are almost the same. If you just think about it, there's just multiple entities with different profiles. So I have an operational profile that has a cost. I also have a change profile as a cost, but also has a value, which will end up as a reduction in my operational profile. So what we've done is just joined those dots. And in terms of closed loop, I mentioned earlier around some of the workflow. We've built the product now where you can just apply a policy to anything you want to. So if I'm changing that thing, then I have a policy to make sure at the end of that change, somebody in that organization who owns that entity, be it a process or an asset or a contract or whatever, signs off that they said that now has resulted in either a KPI, an SLA being adjusted, a cost component being reduced. So we have the ability to close the loop in terms of the information, but we also have the ability to drive that closed loop through behavior, because you can apply very simple but pragmatic workflow across the top of that as well.
And do you take real-time data out of things like service desks and operational help desks and things like that?
We tend to normally take like an inventory of data. So we have kind of APIs that can go and hook into that information to grab it, but it tends to be more of a latent thing. I want to know this now and then I want to pick it up in the future, as opposed to a real-time thing. The only kind of real-time aspects are really where something is in the life cycle, which can be reflected real-time in the product.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Andy. Nick, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I wanted to come at the maintenance thing from a slightly different angle, because I think there's a number of people have latched onto. These things are great, and you often launch them as a flurry of activity, and then they kind of die a death. So I'm always fascinated by IT functions in terms of the culture, the people, etc. And simplistically, I always divide people in an IT function into 3 cadres, different sizes of different organizations. You've got what I call the happy bunnies, who are always up for everything, and they're the big champions. You've got the group in the middle who will happily be persuaded that they'll adhere. And then you've got a third cadre who are typically longer tenure. They're often where your single points of failure are. Knowledge is power. They're typically less engaged. And all organizations have got those. And I'm interested in your experience of getting those guys really, typically our guys, typically on board with this kind of thing. So I've seen kind of blunt instrument applied. If they don't update it, it becomes part of performance management. Clearly, you can try and do and should always do the hearts and minds thing. But where you run into that cadre of people where knowledge is power and they really don't want to play ball, I'm interested in kind of have organizations being a bit more subtle or effective in really getting them engaged, because that's where a lot of the power of this kind of tool lies, in getting the knowledge out of their heads.
Sure. Well, my experience of those types of individuals is all they want is a platform to present their knowledge and their power. And so if you can offer them a platform to be able to, and sometimes you just got to let people show off, about how much they know. And in the process of them showing off for how much they know, you capture it and you go, thank you very much for everything you've just showed off about. So I think it is definitely a cultural thing. I cannot tell you the amount of times that me or my teams, or if some of people in our business have gone into organizations and they've just put up a front, and that is just unfortunately an objection. But I think it's because in a lot of cases they don't get a voice. And if you can give anyone in an organization a voice, they will take it. And so one of the things I mentioned earlier is around being able to, because a lot of stuff's driven top down. We are going to do this, we are going to do that. And a lot of stuff that they do on GRC is normally driven top down. I want to go and find these things, and what are our big macro risks, right? But if you can empower an organization to go bottom up a little bit and say, just tell us where the problems are. Empower them just through either sentiment surveys, empower them through data collection surveys, all these sorts of things. And then just find some of those patterns in that information and then reward them for the basis of what they've provided. It doesn't take very long to go through a couple of iterations of that to bring, somebody around in terms of being able to want to offer up more information. But start off small. But really, everyone who's been one of those types of individuals, all I do in a workshop is give them a platform to shine, and you'll find that they'll take it. It's only those that are really, really shy, but generally people who are really, really shy aren't the people who hold that information together. It's normally those that are a little bit more wanting to be able to express themselves in terms of how much they know. But platform and then giving them that opportunity is really my advice in that space.
Thanks for that, Andrew. That was a really good question, that, Nick. And it pulls into a lot of what we've talked about. There's a common theme over a lot of our sessions, which is about empowering people and getting that people change management is really, really key, isn't it? I can't see Tracy. Have you got anything that you'd like to add? Because I know that you're very, very big on, the business change and getting people bought into that change.
Can you hear me, Sam?
Yeah, I can. We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, over the years, you go in and you look at the various different types of organisations. What's really important is that you kind of get the lay of the land quite quickly and work out what your approach needs to be, because there are so many approaches that you can use. If you get it wrong, you'll go down a rabbit hole, you'll fail before you've even started. So it's around getting that initial feel about what kind of organisation it is and the approach that you need to take, and making sure that you adjust that very quickly up front to get the optimal results that you need.
Yeah, thanks for that. Has anybody else got any questions for Andrew or even Simon? Maybe bring Simon in now just to get his take on it. Simon, you've been here many times before, and I know that you and Andrew have worked together. Where have you seen the biggest challenges around this?
So I think the questions have all been spot on, and the observations are spot on. It's crap in, crap out, engagement, and the upgrade. I think the key, Tracy's just alluded to, is getting value quickly. The way I've always viewed these things, it's like peeling an onion. What you want to do is get data in, connect quickly, try and understand value quickly, and try and deliver outcomes quickly. Because I think the whole point about the sustainability of it and people buying into it and understanding it is being able to demonstrate the fact you can get value quickly and get insight, and insight into the opportunities and challenges an organization may have. So the thing I kind of like what Andrew and the guys have done is, I think everybody on the call has probably managed spreadsheets to death in their careers. And you're kind of looking at all these various things, but being able to pull stuff together quickly with the right quality of data. And I can't remember, Andy, might have been you who was talking about that quality as well, or mentioning quality of data. Sorry, I'll look up there because everybody's up on the screen up there. No, and that, by the way, that's an opportunity and a challenge in itself. When you start to pull data sets in and you just say, look, you really don't have, control of this. Your data's out of date, it's rubbish, it's, so to me, it's really about delivering value quickly, throwing these data sets together, joining them up quickly, seeing if there's any insights. And some of the from a consultancy point of view, being able to sit down very quickly at the end of a week or something like that and say, well, actually, look, you've got an RPA opportunity here. You've got a data analytics opportunity. And by the way, opportunity euphemism could be a challenge. You've got a cloud thing. You've got a shared service. You've got consolidation opportunities. Did you know you have X of the same thing? Being able to draw those out very quickly makes it pay for itself, and it lets people see there's value in cleansing the data, gathering the data, and to Andy's point, managing the data. It's not easy, but actually what the guys have got is something now that you can pull this together very quickly and see that, get that insight quickly. And if you get that insight quickly, you're going to gain control quickly as an organization. And from a CEO's perspective, if you can go back and say, look, here's a bunch of cost saving opportunities, here's a bunch of they're going to love you for it. You know, it really is. I mean, it doesn't mean that the work, you're only the start of a journey, but you know, it gets you to, I don't know, I think is what's been really useful is it's helped identify low-hanging fruit very quickly.
Good. One last question. We've just gone over the hour, so I'll take one more question from the floor. No, I think we're all good. That's a first. That's a first. Listen, Andy, really appreciate it. Simon, thank you for your contribution as well. Yeah, really interesting topic. I think we could probably expand on this on another session, maybe sort of drill down into one of these things and really explore it. But I hope everyone enjoyed the call. The sort of messages I'm getting separately are really positive. We're going to record, we have recorded this. The slides will be available because I know there's quite a lot of detail there, and I'm sure people would like to look at those slides and go into a bit more detail. If you have any questions or any queries, myself and Andrew and Simon are available to talk to at any time. I think over the next few weeks, we've got some more guests coming on. Simon, who's on the call with us right now, actually is going to be one of our future guests. Simon, do you want to just give us a little bit of an intro? I'll put you on the spot here of what you're going to be presenting on in the next few weeks.
Well, to be honest, maybe feedback from this various team as well.
Simon, wrong Simon.
Oh, not
Bainton.
Simon. Good. Not just me. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Simon.
So Simon Ellis, you're going to get a break. Simon Bainton's going to be in a couple of weeks.
So, yeah, I think what we discussed was talking about the whole sort of thing I've been doing, particularly in the travel sector at the moment, around careers, talent, and ensuring that you continue to nurture talent within an industry, and how careers have changed from being within a company. You know, there's no more gold watches. And we find it particularly in the railway industry that people go out of the industry because they reach a glass ceiling. So how on earth do you understand those people's needs? How do you understand their aspirations? And how do you create a career so that, you know, they're not lost to the industry, even if they're lost to the company? And particularly doing work with people like Network Rail and Amy, and some of the train operating companies and rolling stock owning companies, because what they're finding is that the talent from which the pool from which they fish for talent is rapidly diminishing. And that's starting to happen in other industries as well. I talked to my boss at IBM, who's VP for solutions, and IBM finding the same thing. People reach a ceiling, they can't progress within the company, they go out of that company. How do you continue to benefit from those employees? How do they come back into your company later on? So there's a little bit of a link up with the whole thing about retaining data, and understanding the data sets, and understanding what information you've got around both your company and the industry. So
that's great. So I'm looking forward to that one. So listen, thank you everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Without all of you attending, we wouldn't be putting these roundtables on. So please keep coming, and please let us know what you want to either discuss, talk about, listen to, hear about, because, you know, I'm out there speaking to C-level people every single day, trying to get a gauge on what's really of the moment, what people want to talk about, and also bringing together our network even more. So please keep those opinion pieces coming through. And over the next few weeks, we'll even maybe bring you in to present on a particular area or subject matter that you're either keen or you have some expertise on that you think is worth sharing. So thank you again today. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks very much, Sam.
All right, thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.